This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. It's a season of wonder all the way at Nordstrom. You'll find the best gifts for everyone you love, including tons of ideas under $100. And gift experts to help. Wondering what to wear? They have everything from cozy styles to party perfect looks, along with free style help from their stylist. Plus, they'll help make your shopping easy with services like in-store order pickup, gift wrap options, free shipping and returns, and more. Discover the wonder of the holidays today in stores and at Nordstrom.com.
When living with cancer, it's important to be informed and know what to expect. But finding the right information can feel overwhelming. That's why UnderstandCancerTogether.com is here to help. We've gathered practical information and resources based on where you are in your cancer journey, so that you can focus on the important conversations and decisions of today. UnderstandCancerTogether.com, helping you navigate life with cancer one moment at a time.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, inmates who've demonstrated rehabilitation are offered a chance at parole. But does the severity of their original crimes forever disqualify them in the eyes of the parole board? We'll discuss the documentary Nature of the Crime. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Laura.
Yeah.
Root talk. Always fascinating to our listeners, but I hear you almost died today.
Yeah, it was kind of a scary day out there in New Hampshire. So I go all over the state for my job, for my PI work, and I had to go to the northern part of the state today.
The North Country.
To the North Country.
As it's called.
Where usually there's not a lot of cell phone service. I thought of Kevin because I was like, there's got to be a Dunks around here. There was no Dunks.
Oh my God. Talk about being in the desert.
It was like being... There's a Dunks desert. Pretty much all there is in these little towns that I'm in is like the Family Dollar or the Dollar General. That's the hub of the town in these little towns.
And people looking for Maura Murray.
Yes. And I have gone by the area where Maura Murray went missing many times in this section of the state. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go from that section of the state to the middle section of the state to my next stop, still in the North Country. And my GPS sent me down Route 118, which connects to a road a lot of people know, the Kankamangas Highway.
The Kankamangas Highway.
The Kankamangas.
The best named highway in America.
Yeah.
But it connects to the other side of the Kankamangas, which a lot of people don't know exists. And so I was going along, and I remembered I went on this once this summer and said I should never take this road again. And I must have blacked that out. And I got to the top of this very twisty road, and it was like two towns, like, sometimes when you're in little New Hampshire, because one town will plow the road and the other doesn't.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we must have crossed a town boundary because the road was plowed and now it's not.
Okay. Fucking lazy townspeople. It's probably an unincorporated area where there is no town plowing.
Well, whatever it was, I was like, shit, I'm going down. It's super narrow. It's like twisty, twisty, twisty. On my side of the road is like a steep embankment. And the other side of the road, which maybe had been plowed, which is where I was driving, I couldn't see around a corner to see if anybody was coming the other way. I'm like, so I'm going to die down the embankment or I'm going to get a head on. I don't know. So I went like 15 miles an hour the whole way. And I'm here to tape Crime Writers On.
Yeah, that
Scary.
road was the subject of an Outside In story, I believe, where two NHPR reporters used their GPS instead of taking the old man farmer's directions to get to his house. And they were like, no, we'll just use our GPS. And he was like, don't, take my directions. And he did the whole New Hampshire thing. It was like, go past this and go. So they took that, I believe it was that road, and it was closed. But they didn't realize it was closed. They were on it already, and they'd been driving over like all sorts of stuff, and they got completely stuck in the station Subaru. Anyway, the whole point is don't use your GPS when sometimes directions work better.
Yeah. So lesson learned. I'm going to just go, like, now that I know the lay of the land, I will not be going that way. I'll just take the extra long route, which is probably shorter.
The messaging on closed roads in the winter is not optimal.
No. Like road closed ahead? It's like, what do you mean ahead? Like how far?
Sometimes it's not even, I mean, I drove in a situation where there was no way I could possibly like stop or turn around or whatever without getting stuck. And there was no way of knowing. You just drove and then suddenly it's like, oh shit, there's like a foot of snow on the road.
Yeah.
You just keep going and going. You pass people who are cross-country skiing who are looking at you like you're nuts.
The locals know.
Yeah, they're like, what are you doing? But it's like you can't even slow down to ask them questions because once you lose momentum, it's over.
Yeah. Very briefly, Kevin, I do think this plays into it. Unincorporated areas. I know not every state has those. Ours has many. What is an unincorporated area?
Oh, it's a space where a town or a village ought to be, but it hasn't been formally populated and doesn't have a form of government or anything like that.
It's a town with no government.
It's the upside down.
It's the upside down, yeah.
So there's no garbage pickup, there's no plowing, there's no nothing. And it's always like, can you commit a murder in an unincorporated area? No, because in New Hampshire, the state police investigates murder.
Oh.
That being said,
maybe that's where I was.
Free staters
but you
love
can
those.
litter there. So, yeah.
Libertarians love those unincorporated areas.
Well, the other thing today, I don't know if you guys, like there was a bunch of flooding in the state.
Yeah.
So my GPS kept going, entering flood zone. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck.
Very nice. All right. So, Kevin, this is Monday's program.
It is. And whoever has the bingo card about the banter going for more than 5 minutes
wins.
They could bang. You can fill that space. Yeah.
What's coming up on Thursday's show?
Yeah, on Thursday, we're going to talk about the podcast Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery.
All right. Looking forward to that one. Should we talk about the thing we're talking about today?
Let's do that.
Leading off.
The commissioners always say parole denied due to the nature of the crime. But the nature of the crime is never going to change. And you're supposed to look at the person for who they are today.
30 years after his involvement in the shooting of a cop, Todd Scott prepares for his 6th parole hearing and a chance to demonstrate his rehabilitation. Convicted at age 14 for killing another teen and a baby, Chad Campbell faces the parole board for the 7th time to argue for his release.
I know I can never redeem myself for what I've done. Never. Not in my eyes, I can't. But it doesn't stop me from chasing it. And I've chased it for 31 years. I'm gonna keep doing it.
But their lawyers fear the board will only ever consider one factor, the heinous nature of their original offenses. Because they can never go back and change the crime, they believe the inmates have no hope of ever receiving parole, despite their exemplary prison records and expressions of remorse.
I don't seriously consider him to be parole eligible for at least another 7 years, and that might be wishful thinking in and of itself, which disturbs me, honestly. Like, is bursting that bubble my job?
Nope.
The HBO original documentary, Nature of the Crime, takes us into the closed-door interviews with those seeking parole in New York. It explores how, for certain inmates convicted of high-profile crimes, the hearings are foregone conclusions because of public pressure and the desires of politically appointed board members to appear tough on crime. It also highlights a Connecticut program that focuses on the emotional growth of offenders who were juveniles when they committed their crimes. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Nature of the Crime. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Toby, the question here is, like, what is parole for? I mean, that's a question I kept asking myself. What do you think the big question of this documentary is?
Yeah, I mean, it's what is parole assessing, right? Because I think, it's called the Department of Corrections. Like the idea is that in theory, you go to prison, you better yourself, you pay your debt and all this stuff. And at some point you're let back out into society once you've sort of gone through these processes. And the parole board's supposed to assess, like, are you ready to go out or are you not? And I think what this documentary does well is it kind of shows like there's two different kinds of factors that go into the parole board's decision. One is, for want of a better term, like kind of kinetic factors, things that change over time. So, education, your disciplinary record, recommendations you get from people, any kind of service training or whatever you get. So these are the kind of things that the prisoners are using to try and make their case to be let out on parole. The other thing, which seems to be by far and away the most powerful thing, is what is the underlying crime that they committed. And in the case of the two people they spend most of the time on, they've committed these like crimes that are in the eyes of society are very dire, right? They're amongst the people who are most likely not going to be let out. So it just kind of shows that no matter what these two guys do, Todd and Chad, like they're just not going to get parole. They even kind of talk, and maybe we'll get into this later, with Todd, who kills, he doesn't actually shoot, but is involved in the murder of a cop, that there's a certain number of years that's sort of routine for people to have to do before they can be even thought of parole.
Like
I think it's like 40 or 45
right,
years.
Yeah.
So like it's only been like 31. So he's got another like decade to serve before they'll even think about it. So yeah, I think that's the basic idea behind this documentary.
So what's interesting to me is that they have some very thoughtful and candid interviews with parole board members from kind of across the ideological spectrum when it comes to what parole should be and the nature of the crimes committed by these people. And I found it very interesting, and I would encourage viewers to pay attention to this part, the assessment of why being involved in the murder of a cop, even if you didn't pull the trigger, makes that a more important murder than a murder of somebody else.
Cop cases are decided differently and have different release rates, is that person is not just committing an offense against the body of that individual. A police officer's life is valued more because of who and what they represent.
Like somebody actually articulated the thing that never gets said. And that happens a lot in this documentary. Kevin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I get that the shooting of a police officer is especially heinous, and there are different statutes about it, but it really ought to be offensive to every non-cop that the system treats the life of a cop as more valuable than the life of everyone else. And it's not the law treating it differently, although there are different factors as far as sentencing or whatever. But, and this was articulated by one of the board members, I sort of got the sense that he was sort of matter-of-factly explaining the why the system does that. I'm sure he's made decisions on that, but what they end up making the case that why this murder is different from that murder is they say, like, you're attacking everything that the police officer stands for. So now you're prosecuting, sentencing, and incarcerating somebody based on symbolism. And the law as interpreted shouldn't take symbolism to be an aggregating factor. But when it comes to sort of people and their perceptions and their need to perform on this aspect, because that messaging probably came from police officers, right? And so it ends up being, whose problem is that? It's really Todd's problem. Because although he was an accessory and he didn't pull the trigger, so morally it's different. He was a kid, but the law treats them all the same because it's as if you did pull the trigger because you were part of it. The whole point of the documentary is this guy's never going to get out because it's already factored in that the crime was so bad that even though they say, 25 to life as opposed to life, they are stuck with a fact that they can never change.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how saintly they are. It doesn't matter how many programs they go through. It doesn't matter how remorseful they are. It doesn't even matter necessarily if they got the love and support of the victim's family. It's just they're just never going to move that, and it's a factor that they can never change. Right.
I mean, I always think about those like attack ads in politics of when so-and-so was a district attorney, they agreed to a sentence that let a murderer out on the street. Like, it's like everyone's thinking about the future political ad that's going to be made about them.
They're worried about the edge cases.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What's interesting, Laura, to me, and I was thinking about you a lot, is we see the lawyers here and their relationships with their clients. And you work with lawyers because you're a defense investigator. What did you think of these relationships, and how did they differ from defense attorneys' relationships with their clients?
None of the lawyers that I work with hug their clients and tell them they love them at the end of every phone call.
Maybe they should, Laura, okay?
Maybe that would help.
Should.
It was really interesting watching the two lawyers that were involved. You've got one who's like, I take all pro bono cases, and you're like, I don't know how you're making a living if you're taking all pro bono cases, but okay. And it goes from being more of the legal strategist to being an advocate and a sort of de facto therapist who's really coaching these incarcerated men through not only what they need to do at these hearings, but trying to help them along that process tap into their own emotions and their own feelings and their own sort of understanding of what happened, it's a very different dynamic. Like we all, like when we work in that field, you know, I'm a justice warrior. I take on these causes, but I felt like the level that these folks were taking on the cause for these parole hearings was really next level. And it felt like you're never going to win. But what I thought was interesting was, I can't remember which, I'm having a brain cramp. Todd's attorney, when she was like hanging out with her like old hippie man lawyer friend that they like sit around and like
with
shoot
a
the shit.
like every liberal lawyer
is
looks.
that guy in every documentary? It's just that style is in every documentary.
Pretty much. I mean, he looks like everybody's like...
Every defense attorney who thinks their client is innocent looks like that guy. Like every single one of them.
They adopted him. They took care of him. They gave him a security, both financial and physical, that he didn't have at home. And, you know, that's got to be extraordinarily attractive to a 15-year-old who basically is on his own.
But what I thought was interesting in that was when they were talking about like, oh, well, we know that based on other cases, it's going to take this number of years before this person's even eligible. But that's not our job to tell him. And I'm like, that absolutely is your job to tell him.
Right.
Like I do sentence reviewing sometimes, and I work on things where there's like, say there's something that's like pre-sentence, and we're compiling a list of all of the other comparable sentences, and you present that to your client so they know what else is out there. So I found that a little strange that they're like, well, it's not our job to tell them that, you know, nobody. I'm like, so you're just giving him false hope and you're just going to cheerlead him along? Like, that's kind of bullshit.
It's like a realtor not giving you the comps when you're selling your house, right?
Exactly. And that's what it is. It's comps. Like that's exactly what we call it. So I thought it was interesting. And then the other lady who had never done criminal work, she was like a corporate lawyer, and somebody in her firm's like, you should do some pro bono work. And she's like, okay. I appreciated her dedication, but I also was frustrated because I felt like she was not really realistic going into things. But it was also interesting to watch that dynamic evolve, as now she's pregnant. And I'm thinking, like, is she going to be thinking differently about his case now that she's pregnant and he's the one who like stabbed this toddler? Either way, I always appreciate when we have that peek behind the curtain, although it was very different sort of role that we saw in these relationships.
So, Toby, something that really struck me is that it seems like the parole board in New York, all they talk about is remorse, right? But then they also ask the person that they're interviewing to tell the story about the crime and the circumstances that led them to the crime. But then they use those circumstances against them, saying you're making excuses and you're not showing any remorse. It really is like a no-win, right?
It is for those two guys.
Yeah.
Certainly. I think one of the things I'd be critical about this documentary is I think we've seen other HBO documentaries where they show sort of a range of perpetrators or whatever. So you kind of see how these different things work out. And it seems like they've picked like two people involved in very heinous crimes and used their lack of ability to get out on parole as making a statement about the parole system, when it would have been interesting to see somebody who was maybe not doing something quite so drastic in the eyes of the public, to see how it really works. Because it doesn't matter what story these guys tell. In the end, that's what you kind of learn, is the fact that they did that crime. You can tell it however you want.
Didn't this happen to Nikki Adamando as well, though? I mean, she killed her abuser, and like everybody was on her side, and she couldn't get paroled either.
Right. And that may be the case, but you don't really make it through this documentary, right? Because you're picking such extreme cases. I mean, it's hard. Like, if you're going to tell a honest, full picture of what led you to commit a murder, in one case, one that seems entirely senseless, and in the other case, one that takes out a cop on the instructions of a drug kingpin, there's no good story that you're going to be able to tell about either one of those, right? What you're basically trying to say is, these are the mitigating circumstances. You know, I was born a heroin addict. My mom wasn't there. I lived with an abusive uncle who I couldn't leave because I had younger siblings who I had to protect from him. And I found a family in this gang. And when the guy who was in charge of this, you know, quote unquote family told me to do something, I freaking did it. And in the other case, you've got a guy who's just like, I was abused like emotionally by my mom and physically by my father. I was 14 years old. I did not have any sort of emotional regulation. I didn't know how to kind of conceive of what was going on with me. And I was angry and I wanted to hurt somebody. So those are the honest things. And they both kind of show somewhat mitigating factors, but is that the kind of story that's going to convince people who are seeing case after case after case that they're giving people parole for? I mean, these guys have got to seem like, if they're looking at 50 cases in a month or a week or whatever, like these have to stand out as being amongst the worst. And that can't help but play a part in their decision. So, as I've said many times before on the show, I think we put people away for way too long. I think our parole system is way too difficult in order to get out. I think it's broken. I don't necessarily think that this documentary does a great job of showing you how it's broken, because it's taking people on an extreme rather than sort of average people trying to get out and being denied.
Well, if I were the filmmaker, Toby, I think my counter argument to you would be, it sounds like great if you want to do a documentary about the entire system, but it is also worthwhile to look at a particular thing, which is in the title of this documentary, nature of the crime. And so while there's a lot to talk about with everybody else looking to get out on parole, that they're looking specifically at the problem that for these particular inmates, even though they're entitled to a parole hearing, they will never get anywhere based just on the fact of what the crime was that they committed, and that there's no way for anybody to change that. So I appreciate that zooms in on that one particular thing. We don't spend 10 episodes looking at what we'll call edge cases, but I mean, I like that is where we zoom in this sort of like these no-win situations. But it's always a situation that you can win when you join us on Patreon.
That's right.
There are no-win levels of support.
That's right. We're in the business section. Well, good pivot, Kevin. From like the most serious thing in the world to selling people stuff. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if you join us at Patreon, which is patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media, that's us. You can get all sorts of things, including the Crime Writers on After Show. And on this After Show, we are going to relive the experience of having a holiday party at Laura Bricker's house.
Oh, we're going to redo it?
The four of us, we came together like the Super Friends, and we got to spend time at Laura's place. I mentioned some of this in last week's newsletter, but I'd like to hear from everybody else about
the Avengers assembling.
The Avengers assembling and the problems with Laura's TV.
Yeah.
And
the problems with my TV.
Yeah, and all the gluten-free.
So much gluten-free.
Yeah, a lot of gluten-free.
Jesus. What the hell's wrong with your digestive systems over there in Exeter?
I have two friends that are like gluten intolerant.
And we all have to pay for it?
They should stay home then.
Gosh.
Screw your friends. All right.
We're going to get so many emails about
that. You all
that.
ate plenty of the meatballs and they were gluten-free. Everyone liked the meatballs.
All right. Save it for the podcast. We'll bicker about it later. Other great exclusive content you'll get is Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club. Toby just did a book called A Thread of Violence. Great discussion. But Toby, I think from my reading of the panel, everybody was kind of meh on this book.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it's really about the author trying to wrap his head around this series of a couple of murders and then this bizarre robbery attempt that's carried out by this sort of aristocratic Irish guy who's run out of money. It kind of feels like a lot of navel gazing, and some of it's pretty interesting, and then some of it is kind of like, dude, there's not as much there as you think there is, and you're just writing and writing and writing, trying to make it so. You can write a lot of words, doesn't make the guy interesting. So yeah, it was kind of a mixed reaction, I would say.
Other exclusive content we have is Rebecca Lavoie's Readathon.
It's heating up.
A lot happened last week in the Karen Reed case. There were some charges dismissed, and there was also expert witness testimony.
Yes.
So you get to hear all about that. We also have Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. Laura, give us a tease here. Coming up soon, a cat show?
Yeah, nothing says happy holidays like a holiday cat show at a partially abandoned mall in New Hampshire.
Ooh, happy holidays. So festive.
Yeah. Also want to let our patrons know that on Wednesday, I'm going to the dentist, but wait a minute, that's not the important thing. Okay, yeah, on Wednesday, 8 p.m., we have our annual Patreon holiday party.
Just for full transparency, Kevin had to look at the calendar on his phone to be able to tell you when the holiday party is, which is how we remember that dentist appointment.
I was just making, with the time-space continuum of when we are taping this, and when this comes out, I just wanted to make sure I had my ducks in a row.
Yeah, so in 2 days at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, join us. We've been doing this for a while. Bring your favorite holiday beverage. hopefully we get to talk to some of you and, just go to Patreon. You can get the link to that.
All right. Kevin, is that it? Does that end the business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. It's a season of wonder all the way at Nordstrom. You'll find the best gifts for everyone you love, plus party-ready looks for every occasion. It's easy with free shipping and returns, in-store order pickup, and more. Shop today in stores and at Nordstrom.com.
We track so many things in our lives. Trending podcasts, playlists, even your favorite artist's next album release. It's time for an easy way to track your glucose. Meet Stello, the powerful glucose biosensor available without a prescription that tracks glucose 24/7 to reveal how food, exercise, and even sleep can affect your glucose, helping you become a healthier you. Join the personal health revolution today at Stello.com.
So, Toby.
Yep.
Who's our next sponsor for this program?
Toby doesn't know.
Oh, he doesn't?
He doesn't. Why would you be asking him?
That's a good point.
Yeah, okay, so we're sponsored by our friends over at Quince.
Oh, my fave.
Yeah, why is gift giving so enjoyable?
Because it feels good to have people open stuff that they like.
Yeah, right, so I'm sorry, that was a rhetorical question that I was supposed to answer. Like, why is it enjoyable for me? Because I'm kind of bad at giving gifts.
You're very bad at it.
So, like, to have a nice prompt for something, especially when it comes to clothing, because I think as a dude, we can agree that it's sometimes hard to pick out, like, really great stuff. But it's all, what makes a great outfit is not just something that looks good on you, but a little bit of luxury, right? So you get quality gifts at an affordable price for Quince. Now, as much as I like giving gifts, I like giving myself stuff.
You also like getting gifts.
I like getting gifts. You know what I just did? I bought a pair of joggers from Quince.
You love those
for under
joggers.
$50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never had joggers before, and so they really like how they fit and they look. But Quince has a whole bunch of stuff for under $50. It is perfect for the holiday season. Plus, it's really quality stuff.
Gift luxury this holiday season without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/crime.
Crime!
For 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime.
Crime!
To get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Crime.
So, Laura, we talked about this briefly before the break, but I guess I'm dumb because I didn't realize the parole board, and I don't know if it's like this everywhere, is a job that you get paid to do. I always thought it was sort of like an appointed thing that's like some people do it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just dumb.
I'll do it.
But in New York, it's like, especially in New York, it's like a job. And they're getting all these case files right before the hearing. Sometimes they're really thick. They got to review the whole thing in 20 minutes. And they can't really do the job well, no matter what the job is, right?
Right. I think that's the story here. And I think that's what Toby was alluding to. So I think I take in what both Toby and Kevin said about this. Like the story here is that this parole board is totally overworked. There's no way they can review all that information. There's no way they can actually be up to date on all of these cases. And we have these snippets where we go out to some sort of hearings where people are questioning people on the parole board, but there's not as much context about why we're now seeing that, or any context, except we're just supposed to assume that this is something that's an issue because it is.
How often does that factor come into play?
There's a fair number of cases that come in where the inmate can be the perfect inmate. They've done everything they possibly can. They perhaps even demonstrate a genuinely changed person. But sometimes there's just enough time has not been done because of this component of the serious nature of the offense.
I wish I had had a little bit more direct information about why are they going to these hearings? Is this because they're trying to make changes in the parole board? These two cases put a human face on the challenges with going before the parole board, but clearly there's some fucked up stuff going on. We hear from all of these people that are doing this work about how much information they have, and they show you the stack of files, and they're like, this person comes in, they have 20 minutes, and then they have all their sort of blanket answers all ready to go that they all know about, of the deprecate clause. Okay, we know what
clause,
that. Yeah, we know what that means. Oh, the nature of the crime clause. Yeah. Oh, all these things. And it's so basically what? Because we're overworked and because we don't have time to actually review all these cases, we're going to rely on these blanket denials that we know are going to be covered under the law, but not actually really putting some thoughtful time into hearing these cases. So I think that to me was the story, was like, what is going on with that system?
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been helpful, like you said, Rebecca, to have a little bit more of sort of like a primer on who are these people? What do they do? Because remember, like in New Hampshire, at one point, the Seabrook fire chief was on the parole board.
Yeah.
Jeff Brown. I'm like, why is Jeff Brown on the parole board?
Yeah, there's some Mirandos on the parole board in New Hampshire for sure.
Yeah.
So Kevin, but really what it comes down to for these inmates is the performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to actually like not just tell their story, but perform their story.
Yeah, I mean, so much about these high-stakes interviews is about communication and the ability to express oneself, right? You know, we talk sometimes about, like, who gets the better justice, you know, at trial. It's usually, like, the person who's got the most money, right? Or something like that. You know, in this way, you have to talk to someone and talk to them out of sort of this preformed decision that they've made to keep you in.
But they act like they're actually asking questions. And they act like they might change their minds.
Yeah, and you know, again, as we hear, they don't record them, so they go over the transcripts, and so they kind of reenact them. And different board members, because I think it's probably different combinations of people, that different board members end up having different kinds of discussions. And there's certainly people that will go right to the first page and see what the crime was and just be like,
that's it.
Okay, that's it. I don't need to know anything more. And I'm going to go, and when we talk, I'm going to relitigate the case, right? I'm not interested in talking to you a lot about the programs that you've been to. But like, what does the person have to do? They have to figure out a way to express themselves in a way that's going to rise above and break through about how remorseful you are. Todd had a wonderful statement at one point. I asked this question.
How can you be more remorseful? And how do you show that you changed?
Because it's really both like a psychological question, like I couldn't be in my heart any more remorseful, but he's also asking a communication strategy, right? We touched on this in season 2 of The Letter, where we talked all about like this guy like goes to that parole board, wants to like improve his chances, and like, you know, he's trying to ask for forgiveness, and you gotta carry that. But if you can't communicate it in a way that's effective, you could be, like you said, saintly. You could have done everything, and you could be objectively, and this is hard to say objectively in a subjective thing here, but you could be the absolute poster child for why you deserve parole and supervision. And if you can't really say that, because you're not going to have an attorney there talking for you, then it's just never going to work. You know, a mass murderer who can talk really smoothly might actually have a better chance than a cat burglar of getting out, because that's what they can do. Like lastly, I'd say, like, when you look at the two people, Chad and Todd, you know, I'd say, like, who did a better job? Lauren, I would say I think that Chad did a better job communicating.
Chad's the guy who killed the teenager?
Chad, I didn't feel Chad came across to me as inauthentic. And I think he came across as inauthentic because so much emphasis is put on how they are telling their message.
Right.
That they are not actually genuine when they are at the parole board.
They're
and
performing,
you're like,
yeah.
So they're performing. And so Chad to me came across as going through the motions. Todd, I think because he was a little more measured, I felt like, okay, he seems a little bit more genuine, even though he's not saying the right things. His demeanor seems better. And then we have the guy in Connecticut. I'm like, I totally believe him.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that, like, we both watched the same thing and I came away with the opposite thing, which is just, you know, that's part of the problem with the subjective nature.
I'm going to point you both to a parole board. It would be very interesting.
But that lawyer, one of the lawyers also said, like, you have to believe that what you're saying is valuable, and you have to believe what you're saying, because they've gone through it so many times that it's just like, okay, it's the school play again. Let's go to the parole board hearing.
Yeah.
But the point is that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's what I was going to ask you, Toby. Yeah. Because Toby, like, that doesn't matter. Because what's parole supposed to be for, right? It's supposed to be like a check to see if you've paid your debt. It's supposed to be incentive for inmates to do better and to like be good inmates and be functioning members of society in the prison so that they can then qualify for parole. And it's supposed to be like you,
except for you guys.
It's supposed to be like you've paid your debt. I mean, it's almost like this thing, like for some people, like there shouldn't be a parole bar, even though, but their sentence said that, you know what I mean? It's like, isn't that the point you're trying to make, Toby? Like, it does not matter.
Yeah, I mean, at least in those cases, and again, it's back to my original issue, but yeah, I mean, they can be freaking Jeremy Irons up there, and it's just not going to...
Klaus von Bülow?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, it's just not going to get through. It's just interesting what the incentives are, because I would assume, like, they don't talk about this, but I would assume that as a parole board member, the nightmare is you let somebody out on parole and they go and kill somebody, right? Mm. Like, you're never going to get like a pat on the back because you let somebody out on parole and they ended up being a good citizen, right? Nobody's ever going to know that. So it's only going to be the bad things that are going to be attached to you. So you could let out 100 people who end up doing great and are great members of society. If one person does something bad, that's going to come back to you. And it's both sort of professionally and sort of, I assume, in your conscience that you let that person out. And then the other sort of incentives is, what kind of incentives are you giving to prisoners to, do, quote unquote, what they're supposed to do to be model prisoners and to get out, if parole boards are not taking that information in and making decisions based on that. To me, I would assume the prison leadership would be like, you've got to fucking parole some of these people, because if they don't think that doing this stuff is going to help them out, that's going to make this place a lot more difficult to kind of run. But they don't quite get into this institutional stuff in this. They're really just kind of sticking with these 2.5 stories so that you can kind of see how it works.
A lot of it is about punishment, because you kind of get the sense that, like, even the harshest members of the parole board believe this person would not reoffend if let out, but they have to be punished for what they did forever. So it's about sort of like that, like, instinct for revenge. And you can say that word isn't accurate, but I feel like it is. It's like this instinct to, like, eye for an eye, like you need to be punished forever for this thing that you did. And the thing that really struck me is, because we heard from the expert on juvenile justice and the juvenile brain, is that even when presented with data, it still is just a gut thing. Like, you haven't been punished enough yet. But Laura, what did you think about that section where we were, I don't think it's new information for a lot of us, but, basically it explained, like, the one thing that all these cases have in common is they were all young. They were all teenagers when the crimes happened. But teenagers are different than adults, period, right?
Right. Well, and also that expert was like a teenager himself. I was like, oh my God, he was so young when he popped up on the Zoom. Yeah. And I think this is something, we've seen this. There's been some cases in New Hampshire. There was case law about, if you were sentenced to life in prison when you were a juvenile. Now there have been some cases because of this case law where, people in New Hampshire are applying for like different sentences and looking at maybe this isn't the way we should be doing this. So I think there's more awareness around the way that the brain develops. And I don't want to stereotype, but I feel like you usually hear about it with like young male teenagers and being very impulsive. And as a parent, you see how your children change in the teenage years. You're like, they go from like rabid animals to like all of a sudden they're human. And now take teenagers who are, in this sense, we're hearing about one who hadn't had a birthday party until he had been adopted by the gang. And the other one who's like, if it was like shithead, it was my sister, and it was you fucking asshole, it was me, or whatever, that, coming from extremely traumatic families of origin. There's a lot of science out there that shows how long it takes for the brain to fully develop and how it changes. And I think, you saw that with the inmate that they profiled in Connecticut, whose disciplinary records went from having like lots of fights and lots of problems. And as soon as he hit like his early 20s, it all shifted. And you could say, oh yeah, well, he just got used to prison life and he learned how to work the system, or he matured and he changed. And I think, in this instance, like Toby has said, these two crimes are really like shock crimes. When we first hear, you get the one who stabbed this girl like 40 something times and then stabs a toddler to death. I felt like in the beginning of this, like, are we being set up to like be really predisposed to lobbying against these folks? Or are we being set up to show that these were crimes that were committed when both of these individuals were young and not at a place where they were aware of their, it's really interesting. And I'm glad they brought that guy in, but it's interesting to see how different states are handling that. And I thought Connecticut actually having like the whole different parole board for juvenile offenders now was super interesting.
Kevin, what I kept thinking of was the Jason Carroll case. Mm-hmm. So Jason Carroll is a man in New Hampshire who is probably wrongfully convicted. I believe he is. He was a subject of an undisclosed season and Bear Brook season 2. And in Bear Brook season 2, you hear his hearing on whether or not he should get parole because he was a teenager when he was arrested for the crime. And the judge in that hearing says the nature of your crime was so bad because you conspired with 2 other men to murder Sharon Johnson. Those 2 other men were never even convicted. So it's just like basically taking a prosecutorial narrative and basically just like relitigating the case based on the prosecutorial narrative. Do you think there's just like too much legal TV and that these regular citizens who've been appointed to the parole board like just want to litigate? Like they just feel like the prosecution got it right and like they want to relitigate that case.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder like why you want to be on the parole board if it's just to...
Maybe it pays really well.
I guess there's a payment. And yeah, I mean, like if everybody there is entitled to parole, then you're going to eventually cycle through a whole lot of bad people, right? And there are people that are not deserving of parole. That's, based on whatever set of criteria you have. That's fine. They're not ready yet, whatever, even whether you're talking about early release or something. And so it gives them a lot of discretion, but justice without discretion isn't justice, right? So if you're not using your discretion, if you don't use discretion, then that isn't discretion, right? You can't choose to not use discretion. Well, I guess I don't want to get into a rhetorical tongue twister here, but that just seems to be the thing. It's like this is a Sisyphean task anyway. So if we say that parole or the right to parole is an awful lot based on good behavior and the ability to express significant remorse and understanding for your crime and other kinds of rehabilitation, to say the reality is it doesn't matter for these particular kinds of cases because of other pressures that are not written into law, that are not not written down anywhere. If it's just sort of this is the way it goes, then how else are we going to change that unless we highlight that?
One question I had in this whole thing is like, how much institutional memory is there in these parole boards, which are turning over and all this stuff? Because when she brings up the like 40 or 45 years thing about killing a cop and we can go on parole, my thought was, how does that get passed down? Right? Like, this is something that clearly is probably got decades of precedence. But is it written down somewhere where people
I think it's just culture.
No.
It's just culture.
That's it, yeah.
But how do you, like, if I was joining a parole board tomorrow, like, I would have no idea about that. Like, how does that get
Someone
passed
tells you.
down?
Yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah, it's a Goldilocks number. It just feels right.
It feels right. Just like their demeanor feels
and that's
wrong.
what the system is. That's not what the law is.
Right.
But it just feels right.
But you're working for the state.
Yeah.
In the end, right? And the people who are consistent in the state are going to be judges, prosecutors, all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of in that system, right? You're in the justice system. Yeah, I don't know. I just can't get past this, and I realize, but these cases are so extreme. Like, if the idea is to provoke a conversation, these are just the wrong 2 cases. And I even think it's not really that fair to compare them to this case that happened in Connecticut. I mean, it's still very violent. There's no getting around that, but it's not this sort of frenzied killing of a babysitter and a toddler or killing a cop. It's a very violent break-in. And I just didn't feel like there was a point to be made here other than if you're trying to get people who commit heinous crimes out on parole early, which is fine, but then you got to find somebody who committed a similarly heinous crime in Connecticut or something to show how that works.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. It's a season of wonder all the way at Nordstrom. You'll find the best gifts for everyone you love, plus party-ready looks for every occasion. It's easy with free shipping and returns, in-store order pickup, and more. Shop today in stores and at Nordstrom.com.
Track your glucose like you track your favorite artist's next album release. Introducing Stello, the powerful glucose biosensor that tracks how food, exercise, and even sleep affect your glucose. Join the personal health revolution today at Stello.com.
When living with cancer, it's important to be informed and know what to expect. But finding the right information can feel overwhelming. That's why UnderstandCancerTogether.com is here to help. We've gathered practical information and resources based on where you are in your cancer journey, so that you can focus on the important conversations and decisions of today. UnderstandCancerTogether.com, helping you navigate life with cancer one moment at a time.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the documentary Nature of the Crime? It's on HBO Max. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for Nature of the Crime?
I'm going to go mild thumbs up with this. As somebody that works in the legal world, that works in the defense world, I'm always interested in documentaries that have access to the behind the scenes strategy and workings. And I think this was really interesting in that we had two cases that at first blush are very egregious seeming, and you're set up to feel like you're not going to like these people. We get to hear from the lawyers that are involved. I think my issue, why I'm not a strong thumbs up with this, is I feel like, to me, the bigger story was problems with the parole process in New York and the parole board in New York. And they hinted at that, but they didn't connect the dots in a way that I felt was as effective as it could have been. So at the end, I was kind of like, okay, well, that was frustrating, but I really wish we had zoomed out like we used to talk about in the serial days. So mild thumbs up for me.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Nature of the Crime?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a mild thumbs up. I feel like there's a certain kind of HBO documentary, which is sort of low key, tugs on the heartstrings, taking a look at our justice system. And they tend to be good. The way it was set up made it hard to sort of draw any conclusions or try to figure out what you're supposed to be thinking about the parole system based on the cases that you're given. So in the end, I kind of thought it was like a kind of interesting look at two people and they're going through the parole process. And then at the end, it sort of gets contrasted with another person. But just because of who they are and what they've done, it's a real outlier. These are outlier cases, or at least there's not going to be that many of these kinds of notorious cases. So I just, in the end, I was like, I don't know what it is besides a few stories. And I think good documentaries make you think about things that are just beyond sort of the limited stories of individual people. And this, I just felt, did not. So anyway, but it doesn't suck. I mean, it's really well put together. And, the people who are in it are compelling and stuff. So I'll give it a mild thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn, thumbs up or thumbs down for Nature of the Crime?
What do you got to do to get a thumbs down from Toby Ball?
I think you just have to do anything related with the word kill or murder in the title.
Okay. I'm a thumbs up for this. I like the fact that it took a look at a particular part of the system. I don't need a giant overview for everything. The zoom outs, I understand the value of that, but I understand too what the filmmakers were going for here. It's pretty quiet, and I do think it's a thoughtful documentary. It's a little bleak, but I think that's by the nature of it. The ending is open-ended and unsatisfying because that's the system. And whereas we've looked at things like The Letter and Bone Valley and other things where, we're talking about release, there's the illusion of hope. And, when it's pretty clear that the system is, rigged against the idea that you're going to get anything, it's a farce. And so I thought this made me think, and I'll say that, as evidence, our entire discussion was about the issues and hardly at all about the particular people involved or the filmmaking quality here. So, like I said, for me, I am going thumbs up.
I'm a thumbs up too, Kevin. It is bleak. I just want to say this is not like a wildly entertaining, feel good documentary. It's a bleak documentary. That being said, what I like about it is the pondering without telling us we're pondering the vengeance-driven nature of our justice system, the idea that some people's lives are worth more than others, the idea that you can't, quote, do your time in some people's minds. And it demonstrates that through showing a spectrum of parole board people. From one end, you have somebody who's very willing to take in new information, very willing to be candid, very willing to look at science, very willing to be thoughtful. And on the other end, it's like someone did something bad, they're never getting out. I think it does tell a bigger picture about the nature of the justice system generally, at least it did for me. That being said, I just want to warn our listeners, it's not a cheerful documentary. So yeah, thumbs up for me for Nature of the Crime. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the
Crime of the Week.
The Crime of the Week. Parents who took their kids to see Santa Claus at Bloomingdale's are complaining that instead of his traditional red suit, St. Nick was wearing a green suit. It's not because Kris Kringle felt like changing up this year's vestments. Santa was wearing green for the store's cross-promotion with the movie Wicked. The costume change has caused tears for some confused children who failed to appreciate the mutually beneficial nature of affiliate marketing. But some mom and dads are saying, for fuck's sakes, enough already with the Wicked promotions. The feature film has partnered with over 400 brands, including Xfinity, Starbucks, Target, and Lego. There's Wicked-themed nail polish, hairstyling tools, body cream, satin handbags and slingbacks, scented candles, Stanley mugs, Bluetooth karaoke microphones, and even Crocs. All these products are designed to raise awareness to the movie, and yes, it's worked. It's hard to tell where to draw the line and say enough is enough, but for some people, swapping the North Pole for the Emerald City is one flying monkey too far. It seems that when it comes to messing with Santa, there may be some more important things than being popular. So panel, my question for you is, what is the next unexpected, synergistic, performance-based viral brand awareness holiday marketing plan? Laura Bricker.
Oh my God. I think it's going to be some buttery soft Kevin Flynn and Toby Ball mashup yoga leggings with cat faces.
Oh,
I don't know.
So Crime Writers on themed synergistic marketing solution.
Jesus Christ.
All right.
What do you think, Toby?
First of all, I can't believe people are trying to commercialize Christmas.
Oh my God.
Really,
Amazing.
Charles Schultz is,
It's
rolling
not
over
what
his grave.
America's all about, people.
Nope.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking this is kind of a callback, but I was thinking Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer might be able to use his red nose to signal to swingers that the Ioka is in session.
Oh. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think Baby Jesus Huggies.
Oh,
good.
no.
Yeah?
That's good.
How about one other one? The John Reindeer Ride-On Tractor.
That's not as good.
Not as good?
As the
It's
Baby
green.
Jesus Huggies.
Yeah,
I like Baby Jesus pull-ups myself. He's advanced. He's very advanced, that Baby Jesus. All right. Laura Bricker, folks want to reach out to you online and say hello. How can they find you on social media?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Instagram and the Blue Sky, and occasionally I still go on the former thing known as X that was once Twitter.
Toby Ball, how can people find you?
At Toby Ball and H on Blue Sky.
Kevin Flint.
Yeah, I'm Kevin P. Flynn, or Kevin Flynn on Blue Sky.
You can follow me everywhere at Reb Lavoie. I am blue skying more. I am on Instagram and on Twitter. I am still talking about the fucking Karen Reed case. You can find the show on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, and TikTok. But mostly I encourage you to join our incredible group on Facebook. Find us on Facebook. There's a link there on how to join the group. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You'll also get the Crime Writers on After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcasts. Our theme song was composed and performed by Tyler Gibbons. Our editor is Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this program is Kevin. This show was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we also must wait another 19 months to learn if we'll get out.
Let me out!
On behalf of all the Crime Writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Toby, you do me a favor. It looks like with your camera that you kind of like up on an angle. Like, I don't know if it's on the top. Yeah.
It's all chin all the time.
If you could just close the distance from the top of your head to the...
Rule of thirds, Toby.
Yeah, rule of thirds.
I have a side table and a cushion, like a pillow under me.
You look
Laura, you look
fantastic.
perfect,
Laura,
yeah.
you look amazing.
It was quite an episode. I was like hauling stuff around, making my...
Is this rule of thirds?
Now you're still in the bottom third.
That's okay. You
Still
close the
bottom third
distance.
have to be in the top third?
Yes.
Like
2/3. Yes, remember?
Yeah, eyes are supposed to be
Eyes should be at that second third.
The eyes are the second, third line.
Or the 1/3 down or something like that.
The window to my soul needs to be a third down?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
All right.
All right, we're ready to go. Ready?
Yeah.
Feeling a little claustrophobic.
Partners in Crime Media.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. It's a season of wonder all the way at Nordstrom. You'll find the best gifts for everyone you love, including tons of ideas under 100. And gift experts to help. Wondering what to wear? They have everything from cozy styles to party perfect looks, along with free style help from their stylist. Plus, they'll help make your shopping easy with services like in-store order pickup, gift wrap options, free shipping and returns, and more. Discover the wonder of the holidays today in stores and at Nordstrom.com.
When living with cancer, it's important to be informed and know what to expect. But finding the right information can feel overwhelming. That's why UnderstandCancerTogether.com is here to help. We've gathered practical information and resources based on where you are in your cancer journey, so that you can focus on the important conversations and decisions of today. UnderstandCancerTogether.com, helping you navigate life with cancer one moment at a time.